This Week in Parasitism is brought to you by the American Society for Microbiology at microbeworld.org/TWiP. This Week in Parasitism, episode number 58, recorded on July 29th, 2013. Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and with me is a very proud Dickson Despommier.
Yes, I am, Vincent.
How are you today?
I'm better than ordinary, better than normal, I should say. I am proud to be sitting next to my granddaughter.
And next to Dickson, across from me, is Cali Despommier.
That's
Welcome.
true.
Hello.
Another Despommier on the show.
Got it right.
And a young one, too, right?
Indeed.
A rising sophomore.
Yep.
Where are you from?
Kansas.
Oh, you're not in Kansas anymore, though.
Nope.
Do you know what that's from?
Yes.
Okay. We're very sarcastic on this show.
Everybody in Kansas.
Are you sarcastic?
Yeah, I can be.
Do you have a good sense of humor?
Yeah.
She'd have to be a Despommier.
Really?
Yeah, we make a lot of jokes in our family.
Do you see Dickson very often?
Yeah, kind of.
He's your grandfather. His son is your dad.
It's amazing.
He lives in Kansas. And I think we've talked about him. He's
We
an air
have.
traffic controller.
This is
He
true.
likes to play guitar, right?
He does.
Yep.
Is he good?
And
Yeah,
he
he's
enjoys
really
fishing.
good.
Do you play guitar?
No, I used to, but
What do you do?
I'm a gymnast.
Cool. You do gymnastics in high school? Or outside
No,
of
our
high
high
school?
school doesn't have a gymnastics team, but
So you do club gymnastics.
yeah.
That's what we call it out here in New Jersey. Have you been to New Jersey before?
Yeah.
Sure.
What do you
Lots
think
of
of New
times.
Jersey?
It's cool.
careful.
It's fun.
It's okay.
He lives in New Jersey, too, by the way.
I was at a party last night where it was in New Jersey, and everyone was trashing New Jersey.
Were they really?
They said it's one of the most corrupt states in the Union.
Yeah, but the people are so nice. I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, apparently a lot of the people are corrupt.
A lot of the people are corrupt?
Are you corrupt?
I hope not. How would I know?
So
I guess
Cali,
I don't think I'm corrupt.
Cali is here to watch a podcast be done, and then you're going to go somewhere after this. Is that right?
Yeah, where are we
Yes.
going to go?
We're going to Soho
To do
Ah.
to
what?
the shop.
To shop.
Oh, he's a cheapskate. He's not going to buy it.
No, jeez. No, not really.
So we'll see if you have the Despommier gift of humor and storytelling. Right? Do you like to tell stories?
Yeah, kind of.
He loves it. He's very good at it. Do you ever listen to this podcast of his? No?
No.
You should. They're
She
fun.
will
Well,
now.
you're here now.
She will now.
Listen to this one.
That's right. This is how you get him hooked.
All right, so we're actually going to do a real TWiP today. It's Monday. It's 10 a.m. It's very unusual that we're doing this on a Monday.
I know.
I'm all confused, Dickson.
Don't be.
I'm all
Don't be.
confused.
Please, what's the weather like outside, Vince?
It's gorgeous this morning.
It is.
Although last night it poured.
It
poured,
did.
and this party was supposed to be an outside party, and all
Wow.
the kids were going to go in the pool,
Oh,
but
sure.
it poured,
Yes, it did.
so they stayed inside. And
Right.
when kids stay inside, they play video games.
Right.
Currently, it is 26 degrees. We do the temperature in Celsius here in the East Coast, and that is not that warm yet, but it's going to get up to 28 today or 29.
That's not a bad
It's
temperature.
pretty
for
sunny.
this time.
It's very sunny
And
today.
the
Sunny all
humidity
day.
isn't bad outside either, so it's
Oh
actually,
no, it's 63%.
Really?
Yeah, that's quite high.
Gee,
And the winds are out of the north at 6 kilometers per hour.
glad we clarified all
And the traffic was a bit messed up this morning, which is why I was late
Right.
getting in here.
that. Well,
See my phone case, Cali?
Oh, that's cool.
It's my other podcast, This Week in Virology. I
true.
have to get you one for TWiP.
you have to get
What kind of phone do you have, Dickson?
I have a smartphone, Vince.
Yeah, what kind of smartphone?
It's a...
Is it an iPhone?
It's an iPhone, yes.
What
it is.
model of iPhone?
Oh, I've got it right here in front of me.
You don't know offhand. Oh, that
It's
is
the latest
looks like a
model.
5.
I think it is a
It's
5.
longer. We'll
It's
get
a
you
5.
my son has this Otter case.
Ha.
We'll get you a TWiP case. I will make it personally
Thank
for you.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
So which is cooler, Cali?
That
The
one.
TWiP one. That's a virus right there.
Right.
And we'll put
We'll put
the
Racaniello
TWiP
on.
thing on.
We will do that. Wait, I should turn this off then, shouldn't I?
Well, don't let it ring.
No, I
Well, your
will.
publicist's calling all the time.
Oh, yeah, all those people. That's right. There's tons of publicists.
Dickson, before we do the main part of today's show, I wanted to
Yes.
follow up on cyclosporiasis or cyclosporiasis. Which is it? Cyclo?
Not cyclo.
Cyclosporiasis. The funny thing is, after we finished recording the last episode,
Yeah.
you can jump in any time, by the way. Don't be
Absolutely.
if you have a question, you don't
No,
understand.
no, please don't.
As soon as we finished recording, there were reported cases in Texas, right?
We hit it just
and
perfect.
then, I mean, we hit it at the beginning of
We
the
did.
epidemic curve
We did.
because now I have a ProMed mail from Friday,
Right.
which is 3 days ago.
Yeah.
284 cases.
Whoa.
It was less than 100 when we did the last show, right?
So, and if this is not a person-to-person transmission, Vincent, that means the epicenter for the food outbreak source is still giving people fits.
They don't know what it is
They
still,
don't.
right?
They don't have a clue.
Cali, do you know what cyclosporiasis is?
I
Cyclosporiasis.
have no idea.
No idea. Dixon, you didn't tell her in the car?
She didn't ask.
What'd you talk about? What could be more important? It's from her state. She could get it.
This is true.
Kansas is one of the states where there's an outbreak.
This is true.
Well, the last episode of this podcast, we talked about it's a
Yeah.
parasite infection, right,
That's
Dixon?
right, yes.
And it's probably from contaminated food,
Correct.
contaminated by a food handler who didn't use good hand hygiene,
Yes.
right? It's shed in the feces, and
But it
What?
requires some time after being shed in order to sporulate.
right,
And that's the hook for this one. That's unlike many other protozoan infections, which are immediately infectious for the next person, and so therefore you can have person-to-person transmission.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular instance, you can't. So that means
Mm.
that people who have acquired this infection since our first podcast on this subject, which wasn't that long ago,
right,
are still being contaminated by the same source.
yeah, and
and
they
maybe-
haven't identified it yet.
And not
yeah.
only that, maybe they're traveling from wherever they caught it to these other states. You see what I mean?
Right.
So it would be interesting
Well,
to see what their travel history
let's
is.
tell people what states are. So the majority of the cases are still from Iowa, Nebraska,
Right.
which are near each other, and
They are.
Texas, which is south.
Right.
Iowa alone, 134 cases. That's the vast majority of
Sure.
284. But
Sure.
then we have Wisconsin,
Right.
Georgia, it's
Right.
pretty far away,
is.
Connecticut, Illinois, and Kansas,
And New Jersey.
New Jersey.
So this indicates that maybe these are people who had been to these places where the epicenter is and traveled and then
Got sick.
got sick. That's right.
Where, and of course, since it's the summertime,
Yes.
people are
is-
traveling
sure
quite
they
a
are.
bit.
Of course they are. And it would be very interesting to see what the travel history of the people not from Iowa or Nebraska are.
Now, this article that I'm reading here in ProMed Mail is written by
Yes.
Robert Harriman, who is a writer for a publication called The Global Dispatch,
Nice.
theglobaldispatch.com. And I know Robert because he interviewed me a couple of weeks ago.
Cool.
His radio show on Saturday mornings in, I think it was Clearwater, Florida.
Right.
And I talked to him about the MERS coronavirus.
Oh, yeah.
He's very interested in infectious diseases. So
Sure,
this article was
sure.
written by him. He spoke to or with the state epidemiologist in Iowa, Dr. Patricia Quinlisk. She said the likely source of the outbreak, at least in Iowa, is fresh vegetables, based on extensive interviews with patients sickened with the parasite.
Fresh. What is a fresh vegetable sitting around for a week?
What would be the fresh
Not-
vegetable
not
that you
so
wouldn't,
fresh.
that you wouldn't cook? Like lettuce
Or,
or berries, or is berries?
Yeah.
Are berries vegetables, Dixon? Raspberries and
they're fruits.
they're fruits, aren't they? So
They're
no
fruits.
raspberries, no strawberries, lettuce. What else would
No
you not
tomatoes.
cook? Now, tomatoes are fruit, isn't it?
Yes, but you wouldn't cook it either.
Yeah.
Celery,
Celery, carrots.
carrots, radishes, but those are
Yeah.
below the ground. Vince.
She says that treatment with chlorine will not kill the oocysts.
That's correct. That is correct. You can store them in it.
Hmm.
That's same for
This is really funny.
cryptosporidium.
To prevent infection, avoid food or water that may have been contaminated with feces.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful. How would you know this? That's the whole
Get out
point.
my magic wand and there's one and here's another one and we have no way of knowing that, do we? So we're at the mercy of the food inspection system, which, by the way, was just recently revised.
What was recently revised?
The United States food inspection system. It was completely overhauled. Where did I find that ad on? On Friday, on the evening news on Channel 4. NBC, I should say. So we now have a new set of procedures installed by the United States Department of Agriculture and the United States Department of Food and Drug Administration to say, here's how to prevent influx of diseases from other countries. So they're gonna profile produce coming in from Mexico, from Chile, from Honduras, from other places besides the United States, because we import about 60% of our fresh vegetables from other places at various times of the year.
Yeah.
So we've got these problems ongoing, and when you import a lot of one thing, the fact that if it's a fresh vegetable and it's still giving infections, it means that it's something that you can store, and like a melon, for instance, not like lettuce, which would wilt very fast and you have to eat it rather quickly. So this is something that you can store, and so that for that reason, I think it points to a certain type of produce, rather than the kind that would rot on the shelves if you didn't buy it within several days.
Cali, symptoms include diarrhea, vomiting, and body aches. You know anybody in Kansas that has that? No?
Every time she
No.
practices gymnastics, she goes home with that.
Yeah.
Well, if one of your friends has those symptoms, it could be cyclosporiasis.
It could be.
What is
And
all that joviality outside there in the
I have
outer
no
office?
idea.
It's the morning. That's the problem with doing a podcast in the morning.
That's right. And Monday is such a happy day of the year. The week.
So after last week's podcast, we received a letter about cyclosporiasis from our friend Trudy,
Good.
who is in Naples, Florida. She writes, Dear Vincent and Dickson, listening to TWiP on cyclosporiasis.
Or cyclosporiasis.
Which one is it?
Cyclo.
I have a problem with pronunciation.
I know you do. I'm trying to
Cyclosporiasis?
ease you into this cyclo.
What is it, Cali? What is it? Cyclo or cyclo?
Cyclo?
Cyclosporiasis.
Cyclo.
Because I am all too aware of the possible contamination of many crops as a former public health nurse who worked in epidemiology for my state, Florida, I always wash my fruits and vegetables with a product called FIT, F-I-T.
Huh.
It may not be perfect in that pathogens are tenacious, but I believe it reduces risk. Could be hopeful thinking, I know. Also, it does not alter the flavor of even delicate raspberries. I would be interested in what you think of this approach. I have no connection to this product whatsoever other than that of a consumer. I used to add a drop or two of liquid castile soap to fruits and vegetable wash water instead of FIT. Both approaches involved a short soak and gentle but thorough rinsing. Would soap, Dickson, kill the spore?
Not kill it.
Sporozoite?
It wouldn't kill it, but it might wash it from the surface because it would disrupt the attractive forces between the surface of the fruit and the FIT. That's interesting.
So here's FIT.
Never heard of it before,
It
but
is
I'm
the
glad to hear
website,
about it.
tryfit.com.
Huh.
I have 55-gallon drums of it if you want. Recent events with contaminated produce, including spinach, lettuce, tomatoes,
Maybe we
and
should buy
more,
stock in this.
have made everyone more aware of the need for cleaner produce.
Right?
100% natural produce wash.
Huh.
They don't tell you what it is.
Could have used some of that during the spinach outbreak of salmonella, too.
It can be used on food,
Right.
and but we don't know what it is.
Right.
Buy FIT online.
And by the way, part of that program that I heard on Friday in the evening news, someone was quoted as saying that in the United States, every year, over 3,000 people die from foodborne related illnesses. 3,000 deaths. I mean, if 3,000 people died from West Nile virus, it would be a panic. People would really be worried about this. But they're not apparently worried when 3,000 people die because of something they ate, which I find remarkable.
Anyway,
Yeah, go ahead.
FIT. That's
Yep.
FIT. I don't know anything about FIT. I can't tell what's in it.
Right.
I can't find it, so I don't.
It's probably a surfactant.
A detergent.
Yeah, that disrupts the connection between attractive forces that might hold a spore to a surface of a vegetable.
Maybe.
That's a
It's
guess.
not going to kill the spore.
No,
It'd be
it'll
too
be-
hard to do that.
Get rid of it.
That's the point of a spore, right? It's
It
very
is.
resistant.
Very true.
Trudy continues, I was working in the communicable disease clinics when Florida had a multi-county outbreak in the 1990s.
Uh-huh.
Our protocols allowed for distribution of stool culture kits then. Before I left my role, the onus was on the private sector. Unfortunately, many people do not seek medical attention but treat with over-the-counter remedies, and many physicians do not test either. So the great unreported levels of both food and waterborne illnesses is a real challenge to any investigation. Raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, and strawberries were nestled in my cereal bowl this morning along with a bit of cereal. Is my approach biofilmsly? Well, Dickson, if these do form a biofilm, it would be hard to disrupt it, wouldn't it?
It certainly would be.
And unless this fit is tested, in a trial setting, we don't know how effective it's going to be.
That is exactly right.
It is a pretty rare outbreak,
So far, but, if it's an annual thing from now on, it won't be so rare.
I had blueberries this morning. I just rinsed them briefly.
Yeah, that's what I do, too.
I like to stimulate my immune system periodically. As usual, your podcast is interesting, fun, and informative. Happy that Dickson has been more available of late. Warm and humid regards from Naples, Florida.
Right, up
This is
into Naples.
Trudy.
It's a
Thank
good
you,
place.
Trudy.
Naples is a nice place.
I was there once. It's very
It's a
beautiful.
wonderful art
I
center.
watched the sunset on the ocean.
That's a great place. Fishing is great, too.
Now, Dickson, you found 2 articles that
I did.
you didn't like.
In the popular press.
The popular press. The first one was from Yahoo News.
Yeah, well, what else?
Stomach virus linked to produce sickens 285
Summer
people.
virus.
Stomach virus.
What's wrong with that?
Cali. This headline on this article: stomach virus linked to produce sickens 285 people. What's the problem there?
Oh, wait.
It's not a virus.
It's not. It's a parasite. Well, viruses are parasites, but this is a protozoan parasite.
Yeah.
And, Reuters is publishing this. If they would only listen to TWiP, well,
Or
maybe
TWiP.
the headline writer should listen. I've told that the people who write the headlines are different from the people who write the
They
articles.
should run it by somebody with knowledge.
Yeah, like you, but you're never
Well, or
around.
you.
That's the problem.
Guilt. I get this all the time. I'm immune to it now, but I used to respond quite negatively.
Really?
Yeah, I used to go home and cry.
The cause of illness, and this is what you sent me in your email. This is a quote from the article. The cause of the illness has not been identified, but the parasite is most commonly found in fresh produce.
Right.
According to Dr. Herwalt, a medical epidemiologist at the CDC. Why didn't you like that?
No, there's something about eggs. Eggs in this.
I think that's the other one.
Really?
Let me just see. Stomach bug. Ah, yes. Let's look at Bouvier.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me search for... Might be the other article. No, that's not this one. This one you didn't like the headline because it was a virus.
Right.
Let's look at the other article.
The
that
other
you
article I
sent.
didn't like because...
Let's see. This one is... It's the same article. There we go. Here's another one. This one is different from Yahoo. Stomach bug sickens people.
Stomach bug, at least they finessed it. They weren't sure, so they called it a bug.
Okay, here's the problem. Doctors can diagnose it. This is Dr. Bouvier, who is Bouvier?
I have no idea.
I'm looking here. Bouvier, Dr. Nicole Bouvier is an infectious diseases professor at Mount Sinai in New York City. Right here.
You were there for a while with Dr.
Pillais. She said, doctors can diagnose it by looking for either the parasite itself or eggs of the parasite in a stool sample.
No.
What's wrong with that, Dickson?
They don't produce eggs, Vince. They produce cysts.
She must know the difference between a cyst and an egg.
Oh, maybe she was misquoted. It's possible, but I hope she does know the difference between an egg and a cyst because eggs are produced by worms.
Maybe she was
And
trying
chickens.
to be, straightforward and just say eggs,
but it's not eggs.
she should have said cyst, and then the reporter could have said, "What's a cyst?"
Or the environmental resistant stage. That's
Could
what
you? And you can find the oocysts in the stool. That's how you diagnose it.
You
right?
can, and you can also find it probably on fecally contaminated produce as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure they're looking for that.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, it's also a guess on my part, but it's probable that you need very few of these oocysts in order to become infected. Now, they've done studies with cryptosporidium. No, not one. I don't think one's
Two?
going to do it. Maybe 2. Maybe 10.
Okay.
They did a study in medical students with the cryptosporidium.
They fed them?
They did. They volunteered. They actually got paid for this study. And they found out that it took a minimum of 10 to induce an infection.
And these did you hear that? They can actually feed volunteers these parasites. As long as they don't kill you, it's okay.
Correct. But this was assuming that you didn't have HIV, AIDS, because there's no cure for this.
So as long as the infection is mild, you can hire volunteers.
You can. Yeah, you can.
So there's a virus, norovirus, that causes gastroenteritis, and they often do that because they can't grow it in culture, so they feed medical students typically over a weekend. They feed them on Friday, they get sick on the weekend, and then Monday they go back to class. And then they get $300 for that.
They sell their virus.
Cali, what do you want to do? Do you know? You're just in high school, but
I have no
idea. Okay, you'll be a parasitologist, right?
She might.
I don't know.
You have any medical interests at all?
Not really.
No?
Kind of.
Okay. You didn't influence her, Dickson.
Not yet. No,
Well, you're so far away. How can you?
You have to allow these things
He's
to grow
not
slowly.
technologically inclined, so he doesn't Skype or text or email or anything, right?
I email. I do email.
You do telephone.
I do telephone. I do email also.
My high school son, do you know how many texts he sent last month?
No idea.
9,000.
Really?
Oh my goodness.
9,000. I had like 100.
Don't you get
So he's-
charged for that?
No, we gave him an unlimited plan because of that.
Oh, good idea. And how is his thumbs doing? I mean, you come on, you're
Seems to be fine. He got into a good school. I can't complain,
thumbitis.
right?
No, you can't complain. He got into a great school.
All right, now the main topic of this podcast episode today is a
yes.
book you have recently written. I have a
Well-
copy here.
I'm pleased that you should allow this to happen.
It's fine, Dickson. You
That's
are
true.
this is your show.
Well-
It's called People, Parasites, and Plowshares
Right.
by Dixon Despommier, and I have the book here with a nice cover. Is that a hookworm on the cover?
It certainly
Very
is.
famous photo.
It's a
And
very
this is published by Columbia University Press,
Yep.
which is associated with our university.
It is.
Right?
I was seduced into considering authoring a book for them, and this is what I came up with.
Why did you write this book? Did they ask
Why?
you to write it?
Yeah, well, first of all, you know this. You know the editor, Patrick Fitzgerald, who's become a friend of mine, of course, since he is now the editor for this book. But we met in his office when he was trying to induce you to
And
write
he
a
couldn't,
book for
he
him.
couldn't get me to write one, so I
Not
got
yet.
you.
Not yet. But he's working on it. He's still working on it. He would love to see a book from you for, viruses, virology for dummies or something like that. We had talked about this before. But I've always had this book in my head because it's a collection of recollections of stories that I've either heard or lived during my tenure as a parasitologist.
In fact, you read an early version of a chapter a
did.
long time ago.
I did.
on TWiP. But your textbook is nothing like this. Your textbook is a factual
Right.
book about parasites. But this is recollection of your career, basically.
No, some of it
Not
is,
really.
not all of it.
Stories. These are stories,
There are
kind
some.
of layperson stories.
Yeah, it's
associated
put
with
into
parasites.
a lay terminology, but some of the photographs and some of the micrographs, I should say, and the life cycles are all from the textbook.
Yes,
And
and,
I-
you're
I-
allowed to do that because you
Well, we own the rights to-
self-published the textbook,
This
right?
is true. This is
Nice.
So the stories that I chose to relate cover the gambit from the very small parasites to the very large parasites, but they have all one thing in common, and that is that they're all long-lived parasites. That is to say, they spend more than a couple of days or weeks or months inside their hosts. I've chosen them because I think that the ways in which they live long lives offer clues to medical problems that we face in the future, which these parasites have already conquered. They. Why are you laughing? Already, he's reading my book and he's laughing.
Go ahead. I'll tell
That's
you
not
why
fair.
in a moment.
It's not fair. So the plowshares part of the book suggests that some of these parasites, or in fact maybe all of them, but I've only outlined the ones that I think offer the greatest chances for success, for discovering how they live long lives inside their hosts, could open doors for us with regards to medical cures for things like type 1 diabetes and organ transplants and things of this sort. Some major medical deals, which if we knew more about the lives of these parasites, may very well result in a medical cure for something totally unrelated.
What's a plowshare?
A plowshare. Well, of course. What is a plowshare? It's a term applied. Of course, Cali should know this because she lives in Kansas. They plow the land up. A plowshare is an implement which is pulled usually by draft animals, like horses or oxen, and it allows you to create furrows.
Is that a metal thing?
Yeah.
It was just a plow.
Well, the plowshare is the forward part of this thing. Let's look it up and see what the actual definition
Now we'll
of a
find out that
plowshare.
you got it wrong, and you called your book out of.
No, that's not true at all.
In agriculture, a plowshare
Yeah.
is a component of a plow.
See?
It is the cutting or leading edge of a.
And what did I say it was? What did I say
Yeah,
it was?
you said you
Thank
got
you.
it right.
Thank you.
I always thought it had something to do with sharing what you grow, but obviously
No,
not.
that's plowed shares.
No, I
Plowed
see.
shares. In this case, it's a plowshare.
Okay.
So the plowshare is the middle, it's the cutting edge part of this, okay?
Got it.
And so there's an old saying.
Mm-hmm.
How do you conquer your enemies? You turn their swords into plowshares,
Aha.
right? Turn their swords into plowshares.
Right.
So in this case, we're talking about parasites' swords.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to turn their swords into our plowshares. That's
So you can
the gist
talk
of the
about
book.
how they're good for us,
Yeah.
in part, but they're not always good for us, right?
Well, by themselves, no, but the ways in which they have evolved in order to avoid us killing them may offer clues to medical solutions to unrelated problems. That's the gist of the book. So if you
Okay.
don't buy into that, forget it. I don't want you to buy
Well,
this
short
book.
enough that you can do it. Look, I have a signed copy.
You do, and in fact, I'm sending several back with Cali. As many as they want, actually.
You going to read this book, Callie?
Maybe.
You should. It's by your grandfather.
No, but she's she might.
Well,
not
you
be.
could read the first few pages and see if you like it. Did you read West Nile Story? This is
No.
one of his other books. How about The Vertical Farm?
I have not read that yet.
But you
Okay.
will, because you have that book. Because I
Yes,
gave
I
it to you.
do.
He's an author. It has a foreword by William Campbell,
Correct.
who, by the way, we
know this
have.
gentleman.
He has agreed to do a TWiP with us. So
Excellent.
it's just a matter of me organizing it.
Right.
His first sentence of the foreword is, "No less a genius than Alfred North Whitehead was of the opinion that one is unlikely to have new ideas after the age of 60, but one can still make good use of the ideas one already has. It is no secret that Dr. Dickson Despommier's genius has been more than 60 years in the making, yet in his conversation, new ideas burst forth like bullets from a machine gun. Many of his friends have experienced the phenomenon firsthand, an experience that his former colleague, Dr. George Stewart, has referred to as being Dicksonized." That's the name of this episode, Being Dicksonized.
Being Dixonized. Oh dear.
Let me read a few of the chapter names.
Sure.
A Parasite for All Seasons, Toxoplasma. The Unholy Trinity,
Yeah.
Ascaris, Trichoris, and hookworms.
Indeed.
Long and short of it, tapeworms.
Yep.
And All's Well That Ends Wells,
Yes.
Dracunculus.
You read that brilliantly.
Thank you. I remember that story because we've, of course, done each of these. And it would have been nice, Dickson, if
It would have
after
been
each
nice.
after each chapter you had a link to the relevant TWiP episode. Why don't you? Why don't you get into this new media stuff?
Well, I actually wanted them to put a CD with all the TWiPs in the back of the
They
book.
didn't want to do that?
No.
That I can understand, but a link. And you know what? I'm going to write Patrick today and say, if you want me to do a book on the next printing, put in the links.
You know what? There'll be another printing of this book, I guarantee you, because they want to produce a soft cover. So we can do that.
You know, it would be perfect because
do
then
it.
people could go to the TWiP episodes where we talk about these. I'm not trying to make money because we make
of
no
course
money
not.
on this.
We don't.
Dixon.
We lose
it's
money
just to
on
give
this.
people who want to know more, they can hear your voice.
Oh, that may be maybe I have to think twice about that one.
Are you going to read us a chapter today?
I would love to do that. I mean, it would be an honor, of course. And it sounds like I'm sort of trying to promote this book, which I am, of course. But, I mean, not for the money's aspect. I just think the information in it is interesting.
How much is this book?
It's too much as a hardcover book, I think. It's $28 or something like
Well, you
this.
go to Amazon, you could probably get it for less.
Oh, yeah,
And in
it's
fact,
much less.
I'm going to put a
It's
link.
$24 on Amazon.
I'm going to put a link to this book
Good.
through our TWiV Amazon seller thingamabobber.
Right.
I forgot what that's called. And I'm looking for a link to it right here so I can find.
Right.
Hold on. Dickson, don't get antsy. Hang on.
Not me.
And so if people want to buy this book, here we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
They should go through the TWiP bookstore.
Right.
Yeah, it's Amazon. Never. I will put a link in the show notes. But here it is: People, Parasites, and Plowshares. $21.46.
Sure.
Go buy it.
They knocked a whole bunch off.
Go buy it. Dixon is poor. His
No.
clothes
Stop it.
are all whole
No,
threadbare.
he's doing fine. Thank you. It's not for this. We're not doing this for that reason.
I'm telling people to do it. You don't have to, but I'm telling people to go buy your book.
I hope they'll enjoy it because we've had several good reviews so
I think
far.
I think people would love it. Actually,
Well,
I find it. I listened to you read every
you did.
chapter.
I read everything
in
to
your
you.
development to make, and I picked up typos
You
and
did.
that sort of thing.
And idea concepts too. No, you were very helpful with regards to the plowshares part. Very good.
Today, I think you should give people a little sampling
Okay.
in your inimitable style. Cali, you want to leave, or are you okay staying?
I'm fine being
You're
here.
fine? Okay, good. I don't want you to be bored now.
So, children, today we're going to.
What's the name of the chapter you're going to read?
Well, I must tell you something else. I was quite honored by Natural History Magazine. They published a chapter of my book recently in their May issue, which came out in July, by the way. The chapter that they published was called, and I'll get to that in a minute. Oh, I know which one it was. It was the second part of Nature Has All the Answers, What's Your Question? They produced the one on Spirometrum ansinoides. Right? So that's already been published as a separate chapter issue. Also, Popular Science is in negotiations with Columbia University Press for Houdini's Nefarious Cousins, which is a chapter about how parasites avoid the immune system and create havoc with our bodies. So it's an honor to be associated with those august publications, as they would say. So today I'll read the other half of Nature Has All the Answers, What's Your Questions? Because I think both of these stories that I've written, and they're stories, by the way, these are like fictional stories, but with historical fictional novels use real history to illustrate the passage of time through, let's say, the Civil War, which was Gone with the Wind, or lots of these other historical novels that use real historical events, and they stay true to the events, but they create fictional characters to place into those historical pictures so that you will get a flavor for what it was like to actually be there. So that was the premise under which I wrote this book. And by the way, I must say something else here. I think everybody on this show knows that I'm retired. I'm an emeritus professor. And for a while it was unclear as to where I would be in terms of physicality, because emeritus professors are not entitled to have offices. And the Department of Microbiology and Immunology here, run by... No.
I'm glad you get it.
No. Dr. Ghosh, I'm just blocking. Shankar Ghosh, and together with Dr. Racaniello and Dr. Silverstein, were all nice enough to offer me some space for which I could sit and sort of do whatever I wanted, and so I could answer my email and I could chat with the faculty, etc. Sleep, I do that sometimes. I take a nap just like everybody else. I think you all should do that. At least 30 minutes a day. It's good for you. But the idea for this book came up like that too. And I started to actually put together some thoughts. And the next thing you know, Patrick Fitzgerald showed up. And so that's how this book actually evolved. So without your help, Vincent, this book probably would have never happened. So I thank you deeply for the opportunity to just sit and write, which is a great idea, right?
You're welcome.
So, okay. So I will read the portion of Nature Has All the Answers, What's Your Question, dealing with Onchocerca volivulus. So we can link that to one of those podcasts that we've had on that. And the actual title of this story is called Luck Favors the Prepared Mind.
Yeah, who said that, Dickson?
Well, let's ask Cali. Cali, do you know who might have said that? Luck favors the prepared mind.
Nope, I don't know who said that.
A famous biologist, Frenchman, who invented a vaccine for rabies. Does that give you a big hint?
Not really.
How about if I gave you his first name? I bet you might get his last name.
Okay.
Louis. What's your favorite drink in the morning?
Milk?
Milk. Say milk. And how do you keep bacteria out of milk? You
I don't know.
pasteurize it. You pasteurize it. So Louis Pasteur invented milk pasteurization. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And he said luck favors.
And his?
Although in French, I understand it's even better.
It says.
One of our listeners of one of our podcasts once sent it to us in French.
Do you remember it?
I don't remember.
No, I don't either. But it's a great quote because it means that you can be lucky and not know it.
Actually, it's chance.
Chance.
Some people, it depends on how you translated it. Some people say chance favors the prepared mind. Others say luck. But in French, it's much better. Can I find it?
Sure.
Let me see. Just give me 1 second. Luck in French. Let's see.
It's got to be there.
A liberal, yes, excuse me. A literal translation of the French does not do it justice. Here it is. Dans les champs de l'observation, le hasard ne favorise que les esprits préparés.
My goodness.
Okay, that is the original quote, and it doesn't translate well to what everyone says, but
I'll be darned.
les esprits préparés. Okay.
Okay.
Allons-y, Dickson. You speak French, Cali?
No, I don't.
What do you speak?
Well, I'm taking a Spanish class.
Okay.
So,
And you speak English too, right?
yeah.
Very well. She speaks it.
Not
Very well.
any accent there in Kansas, right? Dixon, there's no accent.
There is, but she doesn't have
Doesn't
it.
have it.
That's because her father doesn't have it.
Because he grew up in New Jersey.
He did. But he doesn't even have a New Jersey accent.
He kind of
He has
does
a-
a little.
he is.
sometimes.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Feel free to interrupt at any time.
Why would we do that?
Because you might want some points of clarification.
We are going to have a reading from beginning to end.
Okay.
All right?
If you can stand it, so can I. So here we go. Luck favors the prepared mind. Anca circa volvulus. The morning had arrived all too soon, hot and humid, not unlike all other days in this broken terrain part of equatorial West Africa. For one small boy, today was indistinguishable from all the others he had experienced over the past 6 years of his young life. He was the most important person of a daily parade consisting of himself and 5 weathered old men, all hanging on one hand to a long, thin stick, worn shiny smooth through years of use. The boy held on to it with all his might. The child could not have been more than 12, yet he was already an acknowledged leader in his tiny village, located some 5 miles east of Gumi in the northernmost upcountry region of Nigeria. The troop of 6 marched as one in slow cadence, single file, at a pace that could have easily led the party to be mistaken for a funeral procession. No one spoke. This sad row of tired, expressionless faces and listless bodies was in fact a quiet celebration of the indomitable spirit of life at its most basic level of expression. They were all going to work. Did I mention that everyone in the troop was blind? Everyone, that is, except the boy. These proud, resolute men and their guide went away from their homes and families every day to work the fields, several hundred yards away on the outskirts of their village. Their town was not nearly as densely populated as it had been in the past. Many had long since left, and those who could not remained on to bear the ravages of a dreaded disease that literally flew out of the river and sought them out, haunting them mercilessly to their graves. The same small, swift-flowing stream that was the source of all their misery was, ironically, also their sole source of life-sustaining fresh water. When they arrived at their final destination, the adolescent led the men to a workstation, delineated by a waist-high rope, strung taut from one end of the field to the other. It served as a guide for the laborers. The boy positioned the workforce evenly, about 2 feet apart, as one might do when accommodating certain plants that demanded space in which to grow. He then handed each worker either a wooden hoe or a rake that he had selected from a pile of wooden tools left at the worksite. In prior years, many more workers had been available, but owing to the steady exodus of residents, high infant mortality from devastating outbreaks of malaria, and the occasional horrific epidemic of Lassa fever, a viral infection with a 30% mortality rate acquired by exposure to rat urine, just these few adults remained on to carry on. One by one, the boy assigned each man to his daily routine of digging or raking dirt over the hole made by the worker next to him. Each held a tool in one hand and the rope in the other. At the boy's command, 2 claps of his small calloused hands, work began. With a single forceful downward stroke, one man gouged out a hole. Then the boy, crouching crab-like, followed with a seed, usually corn or millet, that he selected out of his tattered, shop-worn pants pocket. Still in position, he tapped lightly on the foot of the man holding a rake next to the hole digger. In 2 swift moves, the wooden rake's tines covered up the seed. Then the boy stood up and stomped on the same spot as hard as he could, raising a cloud of dust in the process, and at the same time compacting the loose soil in hopes of making it more difficult for birds and small rodents to raid the hard-earned plantings after the workers left for home just before sundown. Despite their best efforts, even in good years, less than half of what was planted survived to harvest. Work progressed steadily, but at an agonizingly slow pace. When the first row was finally sown, the men took a small break as the boy moved the rope to the next set of posts, and after realigning the workforce accordingly, brought his hands together twice more with the same result. This was repeated many times over during the day, with a brief moment for lunch to refuel, rest, and break the monotony. Irrigation was an absolute necessity. Water came from the same stream near town that also ran adjacent to the last planted row of the farm. Tragically, the proximity of running water to their workplace ensured the loss of their sight. That was because all day long the workers, including the boys, suffered numerous bites from black flies that bred in their precious stream. The flies carried a dreaded curse, Onchocerca volvulus. This was the root cause of their suffering. Blindness was inescapable. Every man over the age of 20 was completely without sight. All hope was gone for any of them to live a normal life. The disease was known to those unfortunate enough to experience it firsthand as river blindness. The scenario above was common throughout West Africa before the European explorers arrived, and it persisted right through to the 1970s. Then a miracle happened. A silver bullet was discovered that changed forever the fate of all those subjugated under the heavy burden of onchocerciasis. A new drug, ivermectin, became the weapon everyone had been looking for to drive out this evil presence once and for all. Before that day of reckoning, controlling the population of black flies with DDT was the only reasonable approach to reducing the incidence of onchocerca infection. It involved the use of insecticide in all running waters harboring the filter-feeding black fly larvae. But, along with the black flies, this potent organic chemical also killed off all the other stream insects, short-circuiting the ecological associations of all other life forms living there, especially the fish that fed on these insects. Needless to say, the local fisheries suffered greatly during this period of intervention from 1960 to 1980. Nevertheless, the generous use of DDT, applied both manually and by airplane, was an effective method of reducing the mortality and morbidity from this worm infection. Programs in every affected West African country used this approach were heavily supported by the World Health Organization and other less well-known non-governmental agencies. At one point during the 1960s, civil war was raging in Nigeria, but that did not stop WHO's aerial spraying programs. Not one shot was fired by either side at these low-flying spray planes. That's how important everyone felt the attempts to controlling this awful disease were. Black flies are aquatic insects that breed in cold, fast-running freshwater streams and rivers. In addition to Africa, these pesky biting flies are found in many other places throughout the world, including North, Central, and South America. Anyone who has spent time in the forests of New England in May and June knows all too well the persistent biting habits of black flies. In the New World, the geographic distribution of Onchocerca matches the distribution patterns of slavery, with one major exception: the United States. There are few environments in the southeastern part of the United States that meet this ecological requirement for cold running water where slaves also worked and lived. At one point, river blindness affected the lives of millions of people living in the rural areas of West Africa and parts of Central and South America. Altogether, nearly 120 million people lived within the flight range of the black fly vector. Note that I have intentionally used the past tense when referring to the status of this worldwide prevalence. In fact, all that has changed, and decidedly for the better, within just the past 20 years. How that came about is the central theme of this story. First, though, let's learn a bit more about the worm and the diseases it causes. The adult parasites are long, slender worms. Females are 30 to 35 centimeters in length. Males are 40 centimeters long that live coiled up in a ball inside the subcutaneous tissues just under the skin. They induce the host to produce a nodule of tissue, often reaching the size of a walnut. It has the appearance of a tumor, hence the name Onchocerca. Inside the nodule there can be as many as 50 adult worms, but the usual number is between 3 and 5, and the nodule's size varies with that number. The fewer the worms, the smaller the lump under the skin. If the nodule is directly over a bony process, like the point of one's hip or elbow, or anywhere on the head where the skin is thin, then it can be easily seen. Otherwise, onchocercomas, as they were referred to by physicians and health workers, can be located by thoroughly palpating the body and feeling for unusual lumps of tissue. The adult parasites in them induce the host to supply them with an extension of the circulation, similar in many respects to the process that Racaniello larvae engineer during the formation of nerve cells. In this way, O. volvulus can obtain its nutrients and get rid of its metabolic wastes without moving an inch. They are the ultimate homebodies of the parasite world and can survive in their nodular homes for up to 10 years without being disturbed. There is little information regarding the parasite's day-to-day needs, so just what it is in the way of metabolites, amino acids, glucose, vitamins, fats, etc., they derive from us, and how they do it remains to be revealed. With heavy infections, a person might harbor over 100 of these nodules, which may be distributed all over the body, wherever the black flies have access to exposed skin to obtain their blood meals. In Central and South America, the nodules tend to be located above the neck, since long-sleeved tops and pants are more commonly worn there than in Africa, where it is customary, much less in most rural settings. Nodules in the groin can block the flow of lymph, as in lymphatic filariasis. A condition known as hanging groin can result, which is nearly indistinguishable from the most severe form of Wuchereria bancrofti, the causative agent of elephantiasis. If the adults were the only parasitic stage to live in our tissues, then we would have only these medical problems to deal with, but that is obviously not the case. So if it's not the adult stage that causes the most serious illness, blindness, then what is responsible for all the damage leading to the loss of sight? The answer is in the offspring, the microfilariae. Adult female worms produce about 1,000 of these larval stages each day for up to 10 years. That means that every female worm is the proud mother of 3,650,000 babies. These immature Onchocerca are the real culprits, despite their diminutive size. But as is true for all things in nature, deciphering the molecular details underlying the mechanisms responsible for the pathological effects of the microfilarial stage on the host was not straightforward, nor in the end was the explanation simple. Microfilaria are not stay-at-home kids. They are born with wanderlust. Each one has the option to travel anywhere through the subcutaneous tissues and experience the host up close and personal. Since this tissue is anatomically contiguous with many other parts, including the eye, it's no wonder that the parasites are such troublemakers at this stage. we inadvertently help out too by doing what we can to get rid of them. Our immune system, as good and as useful as it is, tends to overreact to unwanted intruders, damaging normal tissue as well as neutralizing the offending substance or microbe. We call this the innocent bystander effect. But there is another co-conspirator that we must take into account, Wolbachia pipiensis, a bacteria that lives only inside the cells of the adult worm and its offspring. Astonishingly, this much smaller bacterial life form significantly aids and abets the worm's penchant for stirring up mischief and mayhem at the cellular level. The microfilaria start their odyssey, setting off in all directions away from the home nodule, and their trip is not without purpose either. They are hoping to become ingested by a black fly and continue the life cycle. When a black fly bites, it sucks up blood, and in a person with a long-term Onchocerca infection, the insect inadvertently also ingests some microfilariae. Both male and female black flies feed on blood, unlike their mosquito relatives in which only the female needs to feed on blood for egg production. That means that every black fly can transmit the disease. Once inside the stomach of the black fly, the larva first penetrates into the fluid-filled space between the organs called the hemocoel, and then penetrates into the flight wing muscles. There, the parasite develops into the infective larva for another human. This takes about 5 to 6 days. It then makes its way out of the muscles and into the mouth parts of the insect, where it waits until the infected fly takes another blood meal. As the black fly feeds again, it moves its blade-like mouthparts back and forth, literally tearing a hole in the skin. This is painful, as anyone who has suffered bites from these aggressive insects knows. When the blood begins flowing, the body heat from the host stimulates the larvae in the fly to migrate through the mouthparts and onto the skin. As the fly leaves the site of the bite, the larvae crawl into the wound and establish a new homestead in the subcutaneous tissues. Eventually, a nodule forms in response to the growing worms. Soon thereafter, the worms mate, and the females begin to shed microfilariae. The life cycle is now complete. Meanwhile, back in the host, our immune system begins to sense trouble in the form of Wolbachia metabolic byproducts, antigens, and attempts to kill off both the microfilaria and their hidden cargo. Our white cells join the rumble. Regrettably, all this immune activity has little effect against the infection. Over time, months to years, the entire outer skin becomes leathery and pigmented, and an intense and permanent itching sensation is established over the entire surface of the nodule. Imagine trying to get a good night's sleep with all that going on. Over a period of several years, the eyes eventually become involved. When these immune reactions occur inside the eye, all the parts of that sensitive organ begin to fail. The lens clouds up with immune complexes, combinations of antibodies and foreign substances. The muscles controlling the shape of the lens that helps us focus begins to weaken. The retina becomes damaged by our own immune cells, trying their best to kill off the larvae and their evil little symbionts, but to no avail. All this pathological activity eventually leads to total blindness. We have only recently become aware of the significance of this odd couple, that very strange bacterium and the microfilaria, even though these symbionts were first observed together under the electron microscope in 1977 by a friend and colleague of mine, Dr. William Kozak. In fact, it seems that, like every time we look closer at any host-parasite relationship, the more we come to realize how evolved and well-adopted parasites are in their niches within us, and how complex their lives really are. As I will describe later on, killing off just the bacteria with antibiotics has serious consequences for the worm and the host, and is one course of treatment that's currently used. But the most common treatment is the miracle drug, ivermectin. Before the advent of ivermectin, besides those insecticide-based control programs that targeted only the vector, other public health initiatives went straight after the parasite itself, even though no effective drugs were available. Treatments were based on the efficacy of periodically removing the nodules containing the adult worms. For instance, in the mountainous countryside of the affected areas of Central America, for example, Honduras, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Panama, teams of health professionals would roam about visiting coffee plantations and remove en masse as many nodules from the heads of infected agricultural workers as they could in a day. They applied sterile technique and local anesthetics to ensure that the patients were comfortable throughout the nodulectomy procedure. Many teams even entered into good-natured contests to see who could collect the most nodules in a given amount of time. This activity had a measurable effect on reducing the amount of blindness among these populations, since, as you may recall, the closer the nodules are to the eye, the more likely it is that blindness will ensue. But episodes of unforeseen human conflict frequently conspired to thwart even those best of intentions. Nodulectomy teams were periodically disrupted from carrying out their charge by rashes of armed conflicts, bouts of civil unrest, and shifting territorial battles among warring illicit drug trafficking cartels. All that changed for the better in the 1980s. Let's take a moment before starting our discussion of ivermectin for a brief look at how drugs, particularly antibiotics, were and still are being discovered and how they become developed to the point of commercial success. Traditional medicine chests are filled to the brim with curatives derived directly from nature. Throughout human history, many plants and animals have been tested for their effectiveness in treating just about every known ailment, both from human and for their domestic animals. But even the remedies that worked were never fully purified and characterized. The burden of periodically going out and harvesting them from often rare life forms from their natural habitats made them even scarcer, and in some instances used them up altogether. Then in 1899, the Bayer Company in Germany, a manufacturer of dyes and stains, announced that it had successfully made aspirin, acetylsalicylic acid, in its laboratory, a compound originally isolated from the willow tree. This first synthetic drug established the pharmaceutical industry, and it has never looked back. It was much later, however, when the first antibiotic was identified, purified, and used to effectively treat a disease. That was in 1939, when René Dubos, working at the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, stated his belief in principle of abiosis and the supremely simple working hypothesis that soil, as a self-purifying environment, could supply an agent to destroy disease-causing bacteria. Dubos, a soil ecologist by training, eventually succeeded in growing a soil-dwelling microbe that secreted a substance that proved lethal for almost all other known microbes, including those that cause disease in humans. He called the substance gramicidin. Unfortunately, this compound killed many varieties of normal cells, too, including ours, reducing its usefulness in treating infectious diseases of the deep tissues. It remains in use today as a topical ointment for superficial wounds. The first effective, safe-to-use antibiotic was penicillin, as everyone knows, discovered entirely by accident by Alexander Fleming. One fateful day in 1928, while working in his laboratory, he noticed that certain greenish mold had inadvertently contaminated some of his petri dishes, on which were growing yellow-colored colonies of the bacteria Staphylococcus aureus. Aureus means golden, a microbe known to cause numerous clinical illnesses, some of them fatal. He noticed that the bacterial colonies nearest the mold on the plate were lysed and dead, while those farthest from the mold continued to grow. He recorded his results, describing how the mold must have killed off a part of the bacterial culture by secreting something soluble onto the plate, since he could see a clear zone next to the mold that kept the bacteria from growing up next to it. We now refer to this as the zone of inhibition. He continued to test out his newfound mold on many other types of bacteria and found that some of them were killed, while others remained unaffected. He published these observations in 1929 and then moved on, choosing instead to address other scientific problems related to the bacteria, not the mold that had done them in. The world quickly forgot about Fleming's discovery until Dubos published his results much later on. World War II was imminent. Dr. Howard Florey and colleagues in England became rejuvenated by Dubos's findings and rediscovered Fleming's work on penicillin. In Fleming's own words, it was only when some 10 years later, after the introduction of the sulfonamide had completely changed the medical mind in regards to chemotherapy of bacterial infections, and after Dubose had shown that a powerful antimicrobacterial agent, gramicidin, was produced by certain bacteria, that my own co-participators in this Nobel Award, Dr. Chain and Sir Howard Florey, took up the investigation. The rest, as we are so fond of saying, is history. I think that is why Louis Pasteur's famous quote is so apt to mention in these situations, "Luck favors the prepared mind." Penicillin's incredible effectiveness proved out over the later stages of World War II in use among wounded Allied troops and civilians. Before penicillin, Western medicine relied on sulfur compounds and the maggots of certain flies for the treatment and debridement of open wounds. These crude medical strategies date back to the 1800s and the Civil War. Some were effective if applied early enough after the wound was incurred. However, most injuries had a time delay of several days before receiving proper attention, owing to the usual absence of medical personnel at the battlefront. By then, gangrene, a common bacterial infection of deep wounds, had usually set in, eventually either killing the patient or resulting in an amputation if the patient was lucky. For a good read on the subject written in graphic, eloquent prose, pick up a copy of Stephen Crane's Red Badge of Courage. The effectiveness of penicillin in World War II was instantly made it a household word and convinced even the most skeptical of physicians that it was here to stay. Several Nobel Prizes were awarded for the discovery and application of penicillin to a wide variety of infectious diseases, but even then some of the possible limits of the drug were known. Again, quoting from Fleming's Nobel lecture, quotes, "But I would like to sound one note of warning. Penicillin is to all intents and purposes non-poisonous, so there's no need to worry about giving an overdose and poisoning the patient. There may be a danger, though, in underdosage. It is not difficult to make microbes resistant to penicillin in the laboratory by exposing them to concentrations not sufficient to kill them, and the same thing has occurred occasionally in the body." How prophetic were his words of warning, as over the next 30 years more and more pathogenic bacterial entities achieved resistance to this once lethal drug. In the meantime, spurred on by the tremendous success of penicillin, a new era of drug discovery was in full swing. Streptomycin was developed at Rutgers University in 1943 by Selman Waxman, the same person who had mentored René Dubose. Small world. Waxman was the first one to use the term antibiotic to describe the activity of his new class of compounds. After the end of World War II, New Jersey became the epicenter for the pharmaceutical industry, hosting some of the largest companies in the world. As of 2012, there were no fewer than 79 drug manufacturing companies listed on the Internet that called the Garden State home. Among the more notable ones were Bristol-Myers Squibb, Hoffmann La Roche, Merck & Company, Novartis Pharmaceuticals Corporation, Schering-Plough Corporation, and Warner-Chilcott Laboratories. Profits soared with each new discovery of a fermentation product derived from a novel soil microbe, and many quickly made it into the marketplace and were touted as the next miracle drug by sales reps of the pharmaceutical industries and the physicians who used and sometimes abused these new drugs until they became ineffective. "No problem," the industry said. "We'll just isolate another one in a couple of days and things will be as right as rain again. Just you wait and see." Today, there are a total of 138 unique antibiotics for sale throughout the world. Most of them no longer work as well as they did the moment they were made available. Is this a problem? Yes, indeed. It's a big problem. This is the darker side of the pharmaceutical industry that was the specter of Fleming's ominous prediction. Biology is biology, no matter what the life form, no matter what the situation. Nature has all the answers. What's your question? René Dubose's question was simple. Can I isolate a compound from a soil-dwelling microbe whose purpose is to inhibit the growth of another microbe? Of course, we now know that the answer was a resounding yes. All he had to do was devise a way, called an assay, to find it. His solution was to grow soil microbes in a liquid medium in a flask, so-called fermentation flasks. He then looked for active compounds in the liquid part of the culture by testing concentrates of the liquid on cultures of bacteria growing on petri dishes. Every time he got inhibition of growth in the plates, he purified the compound from the liquid culture, and in this way, Dubose eventually discovered gramicidin. But for every answer, there is yet another question to be asked. The microbe whose ox just got gored is allowed to ask a question too. Can I acquire by natural selection a way around this antibiotic activity so I can continue to grow and outcompete all the other soil microbes? The answer here, again, is a resounding yes. The mechanism is called antibiotic resistance, and it is just one more example of natural selection at work. In nature, this arms race has produced all of what we see before us as life on Earth. Every creature has its role to play, and none has a permanent advantage over any of the other life forms, owing to the constant rate of mutation of the DNA molecule. This results in biological diversity and an ever-changing physical environment, which selects for those mutants best fit for that particular environment. With regards to microbial life, mutations within a colony of millions of individual bacteria that are susceptible to a particular antibiotic, let's say penicillin, occasionally result in a few that are now resistant to that drug. The ones that cannot live in the presence of the drug then die, making way for those few that can. The next thing you know, the entire plate is again covered with bacteria that can grow right up to the green mold on the same plate. That's exactly what Fleming observed, and that is exactly what occurred on a global scale when we began to use these antibiotics indiscriminately in lower than therapeutic doses, selling them over the counter to anyone who wanted them. No medical prescription needed. The result? Today there are just a handful of infectious agents that are still fully susceptible to most antibiotics, and a few now resistant to all of them. Tuberculosis is one of the most dangerous organisms on the planet. In India and Russia, as of 2012, there were known strains of TB that did not respond to any known chemotherapeutic agent. Unless the global pharmaceutical community comes up with a new set of products, and soon, millions of people, mostly the poor, will die from this infection. Other resistant organisms that come to mind include malaria, gonorrhea, and many types of staphylococcus infections. Ivermectin is currently the gold standard for treating onchocerca infections. It works by binding with high affinity to glutamate-gated chloride channels that occur in invertebrate nerve and muscle cells, causing an increase in the permeability of the cell membrane to chloride ions with hyperpolarization of the nerve or muscle cell, resulting in paralysis and death of the microfilariae. It has no effect against the adult worm, so a single annual dose of the drug must be given until the adult worms in the nodules die of old age, which can be as long as 8 to 10 years. Regardless of this obvious drawback, over the past 30 years, ivermectin has been directly responsible for the complete elimination of river blindness in most of equatorial Africa and in many regions in Central and South America as well. That is because there are no other animals besides humans that can harbor the infection, i.e., no reservoir hosts. So how did we come to discover this drug, and how was it eventually made available to all who needed it and free of charge? It's quite a story. To begin with, drug development requires an enormous amount of effort and time, to say nothing of the actual expense. Most new drugs come from the research laboratories of the major pharmaceutical houses such as Pfizer, Merck, and GlaxoSmithKline. It currently takes many years to bring a promising compound from the branch to the pharmacy, even after all the science has been worked out and scale-up production methods have been established. That is because between 1957 and 1961, the drug thalidomide, a sedative used extensively by women during various periods of their pregnancies to alleviate morning sickness, induced teratogenic effects on fetal development, resulting in the loss of functional arms and, in some extreme cases, the loss of all 4 limbs in newborns. All this happened after the drug had been tested extensively on numerous animals, including non-human primates, without encountering any of these tragic side effects. Apparently only humans are susceptible to them. The entire process of drug development and marketing was forever changed. Clinical trials became more rigorous, and the amount of research needed to assure the Food and Drug Administration of a drug's safety for use in humans increased exponentially. Ivermectin was discovered in May of 1975. It was an active component of a fermentation broth made by a soil organism present in a sample obtained by Merck Sharp and Dome Research Laboratories in Rahway, New Jersey, from the Kitasato Institute in Tokyo. These two companies had previously agreed to collaborate in the discovery of new antimicrobial agents, employing essentially the same kind of technologies as pioneered by René Dubos and Selman Waxman. The reasoning was that if it worked for them, then it should work for us too. Lo and behold, in this case, luck favored the prepared company, and ivermectin was soon on its way to becoming the newest silver bullet in the fight against river blindness. But there were many steps along the way to moving ivermectin from the discovery phase to the marketplace. It all hinged on the assay. In this instance, Merck had decided to set up a multi-pronged approach to analyzing all fermentation products, which included a tandem screen for antiparasitic agents. For this assay, established in the Merck laboratories in Rahway by Dr. J.R. Edgerton, under the direction of Drs. William Campbell and Ashton Kuckler, an intestinal nematode parasite of mice, Nematospiroides dubius, and a protozoan parasite of chickens, Eimeria tenella, were used. When the liquid phase from a fermentation flask containing the Japanese sample OS3153 was mixed in dilute amounts into the drinking water of mice infected with N. dubius, the investigators found one mouse that did not have any infection, and the others in the same cage had reduced worm burdens. This was the result they were hoping for. After repeating the experiment with higher numbers of animals and various levels of the broth, a solid set of data emerged confirming the presence of a new compound capable of reducing the presence of nematode parasites in the experimentally infected mice. After many years of work following that seminal finding, ivermectin, a complex chemical with a broad spectrum of activity against invertebrates, whose biochemistry differed significantly from mammals, had been discovered, purified, and produced in mass quantities. Its safety was proven for use at high doses for domestic animals of commercial value, and clinical trials proved that it was also safe for use in humans. In looking back, the association of Merck with the Kitasato Institute was key to its discovery. The records indicate that the Japanese soil sample OS3153 had been collected in close proximity to a nearby golf course as part of a global effort to cast a wide net around the natural world, enabling subsequent investigators the luxury of becoming lucky. Ivermectin might never have been developed if someone had not committed to this seemingly random approach to drug discovery, yet the history of antimicrobial therapies is filled with such stories. What happened next is a rare example of altruism at its best. Ivermectin was eventually shown to eliminate microfilarial production by Onchocerca cervicalis, a parasite of horses similar in biology to O. volvulus in humans. Small clinical trials in patients suffering from river blindness followed shortly thereafter. In West Africa, ivermectin proved to be well tolerated and reduced the production of microfilaria to zero. However, it was quickly realized that no developing country could afford to purchase it. That is when Senator Bill Bradley of New Jersey, former professional athlete, brilliant politician, and humanitarian, petitioned Merck to give the drug to those people who needed it the most. Sales in animal health-related areas had by the mid-1980s made hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for Merck, so it could easily afford to do so. But up to then, no drug company had ever contemplated literally giving away one of its prized compounds. Dr. Roy Vagelos, CEO of Merck, agreed with Senator Bradley, and together in 1987, they made history, with Merck becoming the first pharmaceutical entity to give away a drug on a global scale for compassionate use. Since then, other companies have followed suit, setting a new level of humanitarian giving for the rest of the industry to follow. The only caveat was that countries accepting the gift of ivermectin, now branded as Mectizan, had to keep track of the prevalence and incidence of river blindness and make the data available to both the Merck Drug Donation Program and the World Health Organization. As of 2012, nearly 700 million doses of the drug had been given, and each year some 80 million people receive it free of charge. The results have been absolutely phenomenal. Very few endemic areas remain in Africa and Central and South America. With this kind of pressure on transmission and no detectable drug resistance in the parasite to impede the use of ivermectin, it is entirely possible that within a few more years, river blindness will become the third infectious agent ever to be made extinct on purpose, smallpox virus being the first, and rinderpest virus the second, although I'm led to believe that rinderpest is not completely isolated and eliminated. There was one other advancement that made those suffering from this dreaded disease stand up and cheer. By treating patients harboring active Onchocerca nodules with doxycycline, an antibiotic designed to kill off the Wolbachia bacteria, but without giving any other therapeutic agent that would directly affect the survival of any stage of the worm, voila! The females ceased the production of offspring and eventually died as if they had been treated with ivermectin. That finding alone should keep researchers happy for a long time, trying to find out why that should be. This result proved beyond anyone's doubt that all the pathology from chronic river blindness was due to our immune system malfunctioning. It was actually reacting to the byproducts of the parasites Wolbachia symbionts, not against the worms themselves. What a surprise! Other antibiotics were tried too, but with limited success. These findings are counterintuitive based on the traditional view of the hosts and their parasites. I think what all this really suggests is that we still have a lot to learn about life on Earth, particularly when it comes to host-parasite relationships. The end.
The end of that part, anyway.
That's true.
I noticed you changed some of the wording.
I did.
Was it you not happy the way it's written?
No, when you start reading something and it's a long read, sometimes you skim and then you have to fill in to make it sound good. So I just ad-libbed. Hope you don't mind.
No, I didn't mind. It's just interesting as I read along that you did change things, and I just wondered if you could write the book again. Would you keep changing it? Right?
Of course, that's the disadvantage of having a word processing machine that you can change at a whim.
Yeah.
You're tempted to read it every day and make new changes.
What do you think, Cali?
I thought it was interesting, the parts that I understood.
How about that poor little boy that has to lead all those men out every day into the fields, and they're still suffering. And thank goodness that there's this drug, ivermectin, that they can take, and it actually makes them feel better. And perhaps as the result, and what has happened actually in the parts of Africa where they were deserted because people abandoned those areas because of the flight range of the black fly. It's very long flight range. It can fly several miles. So you can't live within several miles of a river and expect to be safe from this. What's happened where onchocerciasis has been wiped out is those villages have returned. And so the social fabric of West Africa has been on the increase, which is what you want to see, basically. I mean, there are other diseases there, too, that are transmitted by mosquitoes, for instance, like malaria. But nothing was as devastating as the blindness caused by this infection.
It's a good story.
Well, thanks. I had fun writing it, and of course, there's a lot of human suffering and tragedy involved in this as well. And we just hope that we can wipe out Onchocerca before evolution steps in and says, "Oh yeah, I can show you one better than that." And, but it hasn't happened yet, so we're in still good shape. And by the way, can you confirm that rinderpest is not completely eliminated?
I think there is some.
As a virologist,
there is some controversy over whether it is truly eliminated or not.
Right. At the time of the writing, which was last year, the literature was very clear about the fact that there was no more transmission of rinderpest.
I mean, a year ago, 2 years ago, the New York Times headline read, "Rinderpest scourge of cattle is vanquished."
Exactly.
It is not clear. There is some, I mean, I was just at a meeting, a virology meeting, and someone said it was eradicated.
Oh, okay.
June of 2011, the United Nations, FAO, confirmed the disease was eradicated, making it only the second disease in history to be fully wiped out.
Right.
And that was 2 years ago.
Right.
But some people think it may still be present in the wild. So
right.
Only time will tell, Dickson.
So we talk about this a lot, Cali. We talk about, diseases and their patterns of transmission and their eliminations or not and their comebacks. And Vince is a world expert on polio, as I told you. And we thought that polio was going away forever too, right, Vince? But that's not true anymore either.
Well, we're trying very hard to eradicate polio, but it keeps coming back. There's a recent outbreak in Somalia and Kenya.
Exactly.
Where it's spread from Nigeria. And recently they found polio virus in the sewer in Israel. No paralytic cases in Israel, but the wild virus is there.
So why don't you ask her the question that I want to ask her? You can ask her.
What's the question?
You know what it is.
I don't know what you want to ask her.
Have you ever been vaccinated?
Have you ever been vaccinated against anything?
Yes.
Do you remember what they were?
No.
Did you ever take a sugar cube and suck it for a vaccine?
No.
She wouldn't remember. It's too long ago.
I guess so. But polio was probably one of those things that you were immunized against.
Vaccines have greatly reduced the incidence of infectious diseases in the world. But curiously, many people in developed countries like the U.S. are anti-vaccine. And this is always puzzling to us because they are good for you vaccines, and there are a few outspoken people who continue to claim that vaccines are bad. They cause autism and various other diseases, but it's all not true.
That's right.
It's the power of celebrities. Many of these individuals are celebrities that continue to say that vaccines are bad, and it's really sad. I see kids with measles and chicken pox, and this is all preventable, and it's because they don't get immunized. It's just crazy.
It is crazy.
Dickson, I have just a few emails. Would we like to read them?
Sure.
First is from Peter, who writes, Dear TWiP team, interesting if rather gruesome report on the BBC News about a British woman who found that the headaches and pains she experienced on return from a holiday in Peru were due to an infestation of screwworm maggots in her ear. You know what a screwworm is, Dickson?
I do.
So here, this young lady here, Rochelle Harris, found screwworm fly maggots in her ear after a holiday in Peru.
Oh, that's not good.
Flesh-eating bugs.
Yeah.
And she walked through a swarm of flies, and during the flight home, she developed a headache and heard scratching noises in her head, and doctors found the larvae. Surgeons said that the fly had hatched eggs and then chewed a 12-millimeter hole in her ear canal.
Good heavens.
I wondered if they were in my brain, she said.
That's not a laughing matter.
Miss Harris's story features on a new Discovery Channel documentary called Bugs, Bites, and Parasites. You know about that, Dickson?
I've never heard that one before, but I'll go look it up.
So, what is the screwworm fly, Dickson? Is that a vector of a parasite?
No, it just lays its eggs on damaged portions of cattle hides, that are damaged by barbed wire. Otherwise, they can't get entrance into the cow. And they actually lay their eggs. It's myiasis. It's a form of myiasis.
Myiasis?
Yes, we've discussed this. Remember the butt fly catching
in your
a
eye?
Mosquito?
No.
And then putting the eggs of the butt fly on the abdomen of the mosquito, and then you get dermatobium infection. But this is similar. It's unusual. That's a very, very unusual occurrence, by the way, for human involvement.
Yeah, very rare.
The beauty of this infection, if you want to call it that, or infestation, I guess, is that it led to a control measure where they took male screw flies, sterile. They were sterilized by cobalt radiation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they then released them, millions of them, in the state of Florida. And they mated with the females, and the females could no longer mate because they produce a substance which prevents them from mating a second time.
Yeah.
And they could eliminate it from the peninsula of Florida this way. But unfortunately, it keeps coming back to the United States from Mexico every year, so it's still a problem. It's an economic problem because it damages the hides, and you can't make good baseballs or shoes out of it after that.
Right.
Okay?
All right. Suzanne writes about the Coriolis effect. She says,
good.
She sends us a link to an article, and she writes, in case no one's told you yet, it's nonsense.
Right. That's right. It is nonsense.
Do you know the Coriolis effect, Cali?
No.
The Coriolis force influences which direction water spirals down drains and toilets. So the wives' tale is that north of the equator and south of the equator, water spirals down a sink or a toilet in different directions.
That's
But not true.
No, it applies to the ocean, however.
Where is the ocean going?
No, but it forms these gyres.
Oh,
these,
the big swirling things in the ocean?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
The belief that the Coriolis force influences the direction in which water drains is widespread and has been repeated as a fact in a number of venues, including popular television shows and even in textbooks. But it's not true.
It's silly.
It's been repeated on TWiP. So we
corrected it. We corrected it. That's right.
And also Robin writes,
Yes.
the Coriolis effect as well. It even affects bicycle wheel spoke screws. Cyclists who regularly travel back and forth between the northern and southern hemispheres would be well advised to build up 2 rear wheels, one for use in each hemisphere. However, there's no need to have 2 front wheels since the same front wheel would work in either hemisphere simply by reversing it in the fork. So Robin is saying that it's true, but
Well, we've got some more folklore here.
apparently it doesn't have anything to do with water. I think this is wives' tales.
Yes. Oh, that's sexist. I think we should just call it folklore.
Folklore, thank you. I was looking for a different way to do it.
Folklore.
Food decontamination, continuing with Robin. And this has to do, I suppose, with cyclosporiasis, right? Or cyclo. I can't get it right.
It's okay.
Cyclist, no, that's the wrong one. Back in the old country, decontamination of food items by a potassium permanganate solution was a standard recommendation.
Oof.
Potassium permanganate. I use that to decontaminate my incubator.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I don't think that would be a good... Let's look it up.
Probably add some taste to that, too. That wouldn't be pleasant.
Depends on what concentration. You can buy it. Look at this. It dissolves in water, blah, blah, blah. What is it used for? Uses water treatment and disinfection.
Okay.
But I don't think you can...
Disinfect your food this way. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Uses. Almost all applications exploit its oxidizing properties. It's one of the principal chemicals used in the film and television industry to age props and set dressing. Its oxidizing effects create 100-year-old looking things.
Right.
That doesn't say anything about food here.
No.
It can be used to treat canker sores. Water treatment industry is used to remove hydrogen sulfide from well water.
Good.
It's obtainable at pool supply stores. Historically, it was used to disinfect drinking water. It currently finds application in the control of nuisance organisms such as zebra mussels in freshwater collection and treatment systems. So maybe at the proper concentrations. I don't know about fruit. Anyway, someone must know.
Right.
Could you use it? 3 stools negative in a row. How often?
What?
Cyclospora.
Oh.
You said 3 stools negative in a row, and that shows you're okay, right?
Well, the percentage-wise, you're only going to catch 2%
Yeah.
of the positives, or you'll miss 2% of the positives, I should say, if you do 3 stools in a row.
And he wants to know how often do you do 3 stools?
It should be
once,
a
right?
routine. It should be a routine. The moment you go for a stool examination, it should be 1 stool per day for 3 days in a row.
Okay.
And that way you'll catch 98% of the parasites that are there.
CDC, cult of the dead cow. What does this have to do with what we talked
Sounds
about?
like anthrax.
Also known as CDC, is a computer hacker and do-it-yourself media organization founded in 1984. Maybe one of our readers had that on his or her email, Cult of the Dead Cow.
Don't know it.
Or mentioned it, and we were ignorant as usual.
Right.
So what
We're
happened?
into a lot of things here, Cali.
So what happens when the pupfish owl dies?
Then those pupfish die.
What does that have to do? I don't remember any of this.
Oh, no. We were talking about the food chains. Remember, we were talking about very short food chains, and that do fish live in salt water rivers?
Uh-huh.
It related to that episode that we were talking about saltwater versus freshwater, and androbus, catandrobus.
Okay.
Remember that?
Got it.
And then I said a most unusual association, totally aside, was this little pupfish association with an owl that actually feeds somewhere else, and then comes back to this branch above this little pond with the fish. All right, so what happens when the owl dies? The fish dies.
Fish dies too? All right.
Sure.
Finally, the alternative energy matrix.
Uh-huh.
Ring a bell?
No bell just went off, so I think the old bell is...
So maybe this has to do with our letter from the fellow about energy generation from biofuel and that sort of thing. He was talking about the compression engine, right?
Yeah.
How great it was.
Right. That's right.
The alternative energy matrix. I've been running a marathon lately to cover all the major players that may provide viable alternatives to fossil fuels this century. So it's an article about alternative energy sources.
Okay.
And we will put that link in the show notes. Thank you, Robin. And that's it for email. So it's time to shut down TWiP again, right?
It is.
Why do you agree with me?
Because you're such an agreeable person, Vince. You're usually right. I trust you.
Well, you're not going to stop TWiP.
Heck no.
You want to stop at 100?
No.
Okay, because we're at 58.
I know.
It goes slowly.
We have a ways to go.
TWiP is at 243.
I know, but you're more diligent.
And now you're going away for the rest of the summer.
Not all of the summer.
Even though last episode you said you would be here for the rest of the summer.
Something came up.
Are you taking Cali to Australia?
But you'd like to go, I think.
Would you like to go with
That
them?
would be fun, but I'm not going.
You can't go with them? Let him pay for it.
So.
He's rich. He's got this book now.
Yeah, I know.
He's going next week to Australia?
No, on the 12th.
Why don't you take her? She would love it.
I know she would.
Right?
Wish we could.
You can't?
Sorry.
Oh, you don't have the money?
She can go back to school before that.
You go back to school till September, no?
Oops, no, she goes in November. August.
And in Kansas,
August.
you go back to school in August?
Yeah.
What date?
She doesn't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
You don't care. I don't blame her.
Yeah.
Soon.
Keep it out of your head. Well, here, when we go back to school, my kids go back to school September 9th.
Wow.
Oh, goodness.
It's a long time. I think they need to go back in August also.
Well, they go to school earlier, and they get out earlier.
That's because of the harvest, right?
Farming communities,
Yeah.
That's correct. They do that on purpose.
I tried to get you to take you to Australia.
That was a good try, though.
I think you would like it. Well, I'm going next summer to Australia.
Excellent.
Anyway, you're going when to Australia?
August 12th.
All right, so this will probably be the last TWiP we record.
Not necessarily.
Till you go.
No. We have 2 more weeks. We have 2 more weeks, Vince. We could do another one easily.
Okay. Maybe
I'm not going to
more.
read it anymore.
And you're only gone for a week.
We've got
You're gone in Australia for a week, right?
coming back on the 26th.
Well, you're gone for like 2 weeks and a couple of days.
2 weeks,
Okay,
yeah, that's right.
We'll get some other one in before you go.
Exactly.
This episode of TWiP will be found, like all the others, at iTunes and at microbeworld.org/TWiP. And you can always send us questions and comments to twip@twiv.tv. Dixon Despommier can be found at Racaniello.org, medicalecology.com, and verticalfarm.com. Thank you for reading today, Dixon.
It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Cali Despommier can be found in Kansas.
And
Yeah.
in the gym.
In the gym.
That's right. So what specialty do you want to try to take up? Tell him.
Oh, I don't know.
Come on, you said to me.
Oh, I don't remember. Oh, pole vaulting?
Pole vaulting. Cool.
Now, that's an
That's neat.
unusual woman's sport.
Have you done pole vaulting?
No, I want to try it this track season, but I haven't.
So you also do track? Or you
well,
haven't
I
done-
want to start. I haven't done
You
it.
have done. Okay, great.
No, she's a gymnast.
When are you going back to Kansas?
The first.
1st of August. That's Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
When did you get here? Just a few days ago?
I left on the 22nd to come here, so.
She's been staying with you and other
Several
people?
Other people.
So, thanks for joining us today. I
Thank
hope you liked
for
it.
having me.
Have fun at the rest of your time here in New York, and good luck in school.
Thank you.
And if you come back to New York, you can join us again.
Now, all your classmates can hear you on TWiP.
Yeah, tell them. Spread the
Yeah.
word.
That's right.
Teachers would like it too because it is science, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.ws. The music you hear at the beginning and end of TWiP is composed and performed by Ronald Jenkins. You can find his work at ronaldjenkins.com. You ever hear of Ronald Jenkins, Cali?
No.
You should check it out. It's got cool music. My son turned me on to him. That's why he's here. You've been listening to This Week in Parasitism. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon. Another TWiP is parasitic.